Ever wonder why a piece of green paper in your wallet is worth anything at all? If you print your own money to play a board game, it's just monopoly money. But somehow, the entire world trusts this specific American paper. For a long time, the answer was simple. The paper itself served as a receipt for physical gold locked safely inside a government vault. This system was known as the gold standard. Think of it like a coat check at a restaurant. You hand them your coat, and they give you a little numbered ticket. The ticket isn't the coat, but as long as the restaurant is open, you know you can trade that ticket to get your coat back. Under the gold standard, an ounce of gold was the coat, and $30 was the ticket, and the rule was absolute. Anyone could walk into an American bank, hand over paper dollars, and demand a physical ounce of gold, no questions asked. Because you actually have to find gold, mine it, and dig it out of the ground, it is incredibly scarce. This meant governments were physically limited in what they could spend. They couldn't just print endless piles of cash because they needed the actual gold to back it up. The US dollar earned its global dominance as a verifiable, universally accepted claim on a scarce, valuable metal. But in the 1960s, the United States started spending money at a staggering rate. The government was trying to fund massive domestic programs and fight a global Cold War at the exact same time. A major part of that financial drain was the war in Vietnam. The military effort required billions of dollars, pulling massive amounts of resources out of the domestic economy while costing thousands of lives. Simultaneously, the US was locked in the space race against the Soviet Union, pouring astronomical sums into NASA to ensure an American landed on the moon first. To pay for the war and the rockets, the government made a quiet choice. They decided to run the printing presses faster than they were digging up gold. They were issuing more coat check tickets than there were coats in the back room. European nations eventually did the math. Realizing the US was creating money out of thin air, a panic set in. Countries started rushing to American banks, aggressively trading in their paper dollars to extract physical gold before the vaults ran completely dry. In 1971, President Richard Nixon had to stop the bleeding. In a sudden televised address, he completely severed the tie between the dollar and gold. The dollar became fiat money. Fiat money is currency that has no physical backing, deriving its value entirely from the public's faith in the government that issues it. Without that gold anchor, 1970s America faced a terrifying reality. If the world decided this unbacked paper was worthless, the U.S. economy would collapse, taking their superpower status down with it. Washington desperately needed a replacement for gold. They needed to tie the dollar to a physical commodity that absolutely every nation on the planet required to survive. That commodity was crude oil. It was the absolute lifeblood of modern industrial economies, required to power factories, transport food, and keep cities running. This search led directly to the Middle East in the early 1970s. The region was overflowing with oil wealth, sitting on the largest reserves in the world. But the local royal families lacked the military stability to protect it from regional rivals. In 1974, American officials sat down with the Saudi royal family. Together, they mapped out a quiet agreement that would guarantee mutual survival. The United States made a massive offer. The full weight of the American military would provide absolute protection, supply advanced weaponry, and ensure the Saudi royals remained safely in power against any outside threats. In exchange, Saudi Arabia agreed to a specific financial rule. They, and eventually the rest of the oil-producing nations known as OPEC, would sell their oil exclusively in US dollars. OPEC stands for the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, a group that coordinates global petroleum policies. They agreed to refuse every other currency on Earth. That single handshake birthed the petrodollar system. It re-anchored the dollar's value to the world's energy supply, making American paper a requirement for global survival. This arrangement built an inescapable trap for every other country. If you wanted to build cities, pave roads, or power a growing economy, you had to have oil. Let's look at how this works in practice. If Japan wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, they cannot use their own currency, the Japanese yen. The Saudis will not accept it. Instead, Japan faces a mandatory middle step. They must sell goods on the global market to acquire US dollars, and only then can they get their oil. Because every nation goes through this exact same loop, it creates a massive, artificial, and permanent global demand for American paper money. This gives the American economy a massive advantage. Because the whole world constantly needs dollars, the US government can simply print paper money and trade it to other countries to buy real, tangible goods, like vehicles, technology, and clothing. By tying their currency to the world's most critical resource, the United States successfully inserted itself as the toll booth of the global economy. No nation can grow without paying that toll in American dollars. The massive U.S. military presence in the Middle East functions as the defensive wall for the petrodollar system itself. If a Gulf nation suddenly decides to sell its oil in a different currency, it directly threatens to collapse the artificial demand that props up the entire American economy. This system also explains a major moral compromise. The U.S. will frequently overlook severe human rights abuses and heavily authoritarian regimes in the Gulf, just as long as that oil continues to flow exclusively in dollars. But after 50 years of this arrangement, a rising coalition of nations is actively attempting to break the system. The BRICS nations, an economic and political alliance originally made up of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, are beginning to bypass the dollar entirely. Russia and China are already trading massive amounts of energy using their own currencies, the Chinese yuan and the Russian ruble. If the rest of the world realizes they no longer need dollars to buy their oil, the results for America could be catastrophic. Trillions of dollars currently held overseas will flood back to the U.S., causing severe inflation and crippling the government's ability to fund its military and social programs. The United States maintains its superpower status through a fragile piece of green paper, held together by a 50-year-old promise made in the desert. Should that promise break, the global order changes overnight. If you want to understand more about how the world's hidden systems really work, make sure to subscribe.